Attendees here with us today. It looks like we got the recording going. So I think we're ready to go. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this exciting sneak peek at the 2020 IAC virtual conference. Today, Stephen Bond, Kier, and myself will be sharing about holistic agriculture management, focus on the growing, tending, and gathering. To share some really fun knowledge that you'll be exposed to by attending the conference. And hopefully today's webinar will get everyone excited for that in-depth deep dive into the knowledge at the conference, which will be occurring in December 7th through the 10th. So welcome. And with that, if you're interested in registering, you can check out our website at indianag.org. And you can also join our mailing list to stay up to date on all the current happenings at IAC. There's a slide. We're really excited. We're going virtual this year, so everyone can attend easily and need to be COVID safe and just really respect the safety of everyone, of our elders, of our youth, make sure that we are able to continue to practice good traditions in our own communities. So we hope that you're able to join us online this year.
And if you can't join us, the conference will be made available, in recording format. So still get that, write that link down.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Bond, and he's going to share some insight about growing.
Okay, Ticon, are you going to handle the slides?
Yep, so just give me a cue and I'll move it forward.
Okay, I'll just do that. All right, so, obviously we're a national group, and we work with tribes and in all reaches of the continental U.S. and Hawaii and little islands all around, Alaska, I imagine. So I'm located here in the Southern Plains in Oklahoma, and I've worked the Western region, which is Arizona and Utah, and Eastern Oklahoma region, and I've traveled all over the country working with a lot of different tribes that are utilizing different growing techniques and different scales and scopes and methodologies, and for different reasons. Some people are growing for economic development, and some people are providing for their communities in really remote locations. So do the next slide. So this first slide is just kind of a representation of the historic distribution of the tribes. And so we have, there's a lot of community garden action. So the title of this breakout is Grow, Harvest, and Tend. And so I'll talk a little briefly about all of that. Here's the Ada Community Garden. We can go ahead and switch it out. So that's Ada, Oklahoma. This is at Osage Bird Creek Farm, and we were installing a 2-inch irrigation line for a 10-acre production, and with some greenhouses. So go to the next. Yeah, and so here's an irrigation box. We'd had a bunch of folks that were part of AmeriCorps that year, and got to have hands-on training and learn about erecting their own greenhouses and installing this large-scale irrigation system. And then this is in the Pacific Northwest and Hoopa. Megan Baldy showing off her new small-scale tractor equipment, which we'll talk more about in other slides. And they use that to develop their community garden. And they've broken into more ground, so they've got some raised beds, and they're growing flat too. And it's a lovely place to grow. Some of us are growing in the desert, some of us are growing in the southern part of the country, and other folks have issues with extreme cold. We've got drought. We've got a little bit of everything. We got so we've IAC's had a lot a lot of great opportunities to work with tribes across the U.S. and doing multiple things: maple production, pecans, fruit, citrus. I just a little bit of everything, and of course, there's some obscure wildlife too. But I'm talking about the grow portion of this, and so I thought it'd be great to throw in these last two definitions. We've got specialty crop production and wild harvest. So just because things are wild harvested doesn't mean they don't qualify for USDA programming as a cultivation technique. So if they're managed, they may fall into to the eligibility for USDA services. And so I'll leave y'all to read this definition yourselves. But the idea that within the USDA lexicon there are words for wild harvest. There's a definition that means something, and there's program eligibility that's associated with that. So as I was saying earlier, we're growing across the board in all different kinds of climates and altitudes and adverse conditions, and the plant hardiness map is something that always comes into play when we're determining what crops are suitable for particular areas, and we'll see a wide range of different presentations as we have in the past years in these areas. So we've had examples from Elko, Nevada, and their solutions in greenhouse production for subsistence for the communities, and all the exciting stuff that's going on in the Pueblos and how they use flood irrigation and to grow their ancestral crops. And there's a huge surge of folks up in the Northeast that are putting in larger scale 40, 60 acre plus production for their ancestral corn and growing squash and getting into the farmers market world. We got all kinds of exciting areas that come up in these talks. So it's when I'm working with our TA clients, we talk about how every agricultural site is site specific, and even within a parcel of land, especially on the reservation where you have thousands of acres or several hundred acres, you may be better suited to grow a particular crop on the left side than the right side, and our irrigation availability varies greatly as well. And so we have to so each and every site is special, and we have to kind of sit down and put our heads together and figure out what programs from USDA are applicable, and what cultivation techniques and equipment is adequate or suitable for particular areas. When it comes to irrigation, there's a whole myriad of flow rates and distances between emitters, and flood irrigation and drip irrigation and subsurface irrigation, and impact sprayers and rollout sprayers that are influenced by soil types. In addition to that, like we had said, we see a lot of different scale and scope. So some folks are just wanting to do a community garden level. We have individual producers that are growing at a subsistence level, and all these things are considered agriculture, even at the smallest scale with utilizing hand tools. So the baseline definition for a farm is if you produce $1,000 or more of produce or animal product that you either consume yourself or sell. And so just like the production varies, so does the irrigation scale, from very simple gravity flow units to some really advanced subsurface irrigations. And of course we have hydroponics, and everything kind of fits into this broad topic. So with this year, it seems we've got kind of a value added run in the conference, and American Indian products. We've got the grazing and management, and a bunch of crop production and wild and harvest and management of of natural resources in our section. But so I put some more photos in here of some simple irrigations that we've worked on in the years. This is like a market scale approach where we're using BCS tractors, and that's been hugely popular across Indian country for 1 to 10 acre production operations, and especially folks with the smaller budget that can't afford the $40,000-$60,000 tractor and another $100,000 worth of implements. So we can see the beds here with the PVC pipe running perpendicular, and the next slide we can see a valve box that is connected to a water source, and that valve box runs the supply line, and within that supply line you can implement fertigation where that PVC comes up out of the ground, and you can hook up timers to it and all kinds of good stuff. And so these are some of the projects that we've put in all throughout Indian country. So we'll do the next slide. You can see here's a former intern running out the drip lines at a site that we use as a demonstration farm a few years back. So the BCS tractors and smaller scale tractors are something that's continue to come up, even with the tribes that are putting in operations at the 10 to 100, 10 to 60 acre for vegetable production, because they allow you to do some direct sell market gardening in addition to maybe more of a commercial commodity level production. So one example would be, if you have 20 acres of production, that's all, and only a dozen people in your tribal ag program or in your community operation. You could do, an acre or two by hand, but it gets out of control. So you may be able to do some sweet corn and some potatoes and some pumpkins on that additional 18 acres with a 4-wheel tractor. And then these little 2-wheel tractors are keen for doing some small scale production of lettuce and radishes, and to get a great diversity in your community or in your market booth. So here's the simplest variation that I've seen. These are the 332s. There was a whole series of little John Deere tractors that were kind of like the original estate tractors. And this is a diesel operated unit, and it has a 3-point. That's not very useful, but it'll get you a rake or a box blade, which beats the heck out of a wheelbarrow. So, excuse me. Here's a little step up. This is I believe it's a 14 horse, maybe 12 horse Sato Beaver tractor, and Mitsubishi makes a bunch of tractors in this category, and these get recommended to folks that have $10,000 or $12,000 for a 4-wheel tractor and can afford to bring in some smaller scale implements, but don't need to do too much besides just growing in the dirt, not any major tillage or anything. So, with that being said, I've installed acres of plasticulture with this Beaver tractor. Go to the next one. So another thing that these little Mitsubishi or Beaver or Sato tractors would be good for would be doing some light tillage. You can do precision seeding and all of that. They're 4-wheel drive, and just about anybody in the country could probably get on Craigslist and find and access these little tractors at a discount. Here's I got a little ditch witch that we use at community gardens and to help some individual producers when they're in a pinch. But this was a full semi-load or 12 tons of soil that was dumped, and we used the ditch witch to spread it out. It only took about an hour. So big things come in small packages sometimes, and we see a lot of that as the tribes and tribal producers are developing across the region. And so I always like to kind of show some of the small scale equipment when we're talking cultivation. Here's a Grillo tractor that I acquired off of Earth Tools BCS. with a rotary plow, and it helps you make these large raised beds. And so if we're not making them by hand, which I've run into a lot of community gardens and groups that are trying to grow like this, so you can get your crops out of when you have a lot of water, it creates a good drainage ditch. So this is kind of a passive drainage basin that's integrated into your flower beds, and these are utilized in more of the permanent agricultural beds. Here's the BCS that I've mentioned a few times, and I've got it setting up on a block, and we're installing wheel extensions. And so if you look to the right of the slide, you see we got a tire off and one of the wheel extensions on, and with the other wheel extension, we can straddle a 31-inch bed, and that's a pretty standard for market farming. And we've seen these BCS units go into several communities across the country. Here's the power harrow or rotary plow on the BCS making mounds at a community garden site. So here's the same BCS. The 853 is kind of like it's a heavier two-wheel tractor that can get a plow in the ground for harvesting potato plow or to bust up some soil at a really small scale. I've got a double disc ridger mounder set up on a toolbar in this image, and we're setting up for potato production. So you can see we ridged up the mounds, and then we come through and we use a middle buster to create our ridges to drop the potatoes in. I've also grown sunchokes this way, or the Jerusalem artichoke is a kind of more of a common market name. And then you come back over with the double disc and close it up. So you can do acres potatoes with these guys. And here's those potatoes grown later. And this is us harvesting with the BCS. So it's a really small scale rudimentary approach to kind of mechanize for small community gardens and beginning farmers. And they do have a larger potato harvester you can put on this unit that undercuts. This is the power harrow cleaning up the potato beds so we could use our precision seeder, which is in the next slide. And so this is David Carell. He works with the Chickasaw Nation and develops our horticulture program. And so they've got hydroponic tomatoes and some community gardens and demonstration garden sites. And he and I do a lot of projects together here in Oklahoma. But that was a Jing seeder in that image for precision seeding. So in this image, we're setting a different type of bed at the Pawnee for Deb Echohawk's seed project. And you can see we got the Jing seeder out. We actually we're able to precision seed her flower corn with that in a double row with the Jing seeder, and she can't remember why we didn't use the power harrow, but they wanted to come in and physically, push the seed in a little deeper. And so we can see that in the next image. And I put some prices up here on those BCS units because we work with a lot of communities and groups to recommend special equipment. As a project's developing, it's kind of above and beyond the USDA stuff that we do. But yeah, there's one last voice page. Yeah. This is a little community garden that we're setting up to be ADA compliant right out of a classroom, and we work with the kids to talk about youth loans and USDA programs, and there were a couple of youth in that group that wanted to go in and do vegetable production, and took great interest in the irrigation and everything. So it's a fun little project. And before I turn it over to Kira real quickly, I'll try to make a conclusion of that, or a summary of that. Is we see a lot of different unique growing conditions and goals throughout the country, and one of the many things that we do with IAC is fit programs to the needs of our TA clients and help them access some of the technology that we see in the region and just kind of bridge the gap. And so that's kind of why we're the Technical Assistance Network. We're tied in with a bunch of different folks that can make different recommendations, and there's a lot that goes into developing a fund. So anyways, here we'll send it off for Keir Johnson, IAC Pacific Region. We can't hear you, Keir. So Keir is on the road. We spend a lot of time on the road traversing between the communities.
Can you all hear me now?
There we go. Can hear you.
Yeah, so I'm stealing internet from a local library. I noticed that I've called in too, just in case the internet goes.
We just lost your voice again.
Oh, you hear me now?
There we go. Now I can hear you.
Thank you. Okay. So yeah, I'm stealing internet at the local library here en route. We're doing some filming as part of a American Indian Foods project. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. Thank you all so much for joining today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the realm of tending, and we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up, the strategic partnership opportunities with NRCS. For those that are not familiar, NRCS is one of the 17 agencies under the USDA umbrella. They focus on land management and conservation under these particular areas: soil, water, animals, plants, air, and communities. They call that their H factor. So NRCS has been a really strong partner with us, both locally and nationally. Been a lot of really amazing on-the-ground type of assistance with individual tribal producers and whole tribal communities. And so I'll focus the next several slides on this partnership here. Next slide. Hello. I just lost T-Con, it looks like.
I'm here. Yeah, we just lost the presentation screen too, Keir.
Okay, let me, I can pull it up. Let's see if it'll work for me. Pardon us, folks. Okay. Of course, now my internet's kind of diving, so hopefully it'll see. Okay, thank you all for patience. Alrighty, so really the key areas I wanted to cover with regard to NRCS, the conservation planning opportunities. They're really going to focus on a collaborative development of a conservation plan that really is guided by the landholders themselves. So the objectives that you, the client, or the tribe has are the starting point to the conversation with NRCS. They're going to look at the resources, any common issues that you've identified relating to land management or your agricultural operation. They're going to help to design alternatives, so practices that they would recommend for you to carry out and to mitigate issues that you identify. Then you'll have the opportunity to make decisions and then implement those decisions and then evaluate results. So that's kind of the overall approach that they'll take with you. Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, is their flagship program. It's a program that is heavily utilized in Indian country. A lot of communities and individual producers are utilizing CSP. There's partnership projects that utilize the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. Folks that are interested in maybe looking at instilling their land in an easement and wetland habitat restoration, protection, and the like. Some other project area examples that they really focus on under this EQIP program would be in diversified farm settings. They'll do traditional plant restoration. They'll work in forestry. They'll work in rangeland. In California, and it's different state by state. NRCS really can be responsive to the norms and the realities on the ground, and take guidance from partners and individual producers in shaping their programs to be as reflective as possible to the agricultural issues that emerge. In California, we have a tribal set-aside and a committed state conservationist and state leadership team that has really worked to earmark state-level funding specific to tribal projects under those areas identified in the previous slide. A great example of this is the northern Maidu people who have utilized NRCS EQIP for prescribed fire practices to really help to mitigate catastrophic fuel load and catastrophic fire potential, as well as burn for stimulating useful traditional plant growth. NRCS plant material centers are dotted throughout the country. There's 25 of these centers, and they're based in ecologically distinct areas across the country. They have lots of capacity to run trials and to sometimes lend their facilities in partnership with tribal communities looking to test the propagation of certain traditional plants, for example, which has occurred out here in California at the Lockford Plant Material Center. And these are some tribal representatives, utilizing a lath house on site at this plant material center to propagate elderberry and yarrow and looks like possibly some angelica as well. So that's a really neat resource. And the map's a little small there, but you can see that they are pretty well spread across the country. And it's definitely a strategic partnership there to work with the plant materials center that services your region or community. NRCS also provides an opportunity for tribal representatives, tribal organizations, individual tribal producers to directly influence the ranking criteria for their environmental quality incentives program for the application process. So in California here, we meet twice a year and provide a forum for tribal community members to voice their top resource concern priority areas, so land management goals that they have, and that information directly supports how the agency assesses applications that come in under the tribal EQIP program. So that's been really successful. They've absolutely made adjustments and been quite responsive to ensure that the goals that tribes have on the ground for their land management are incorporated into how they, assess and rank their applications. They really provide also an opportunity to collaborate on common issues, to focus on certain areas that are of immediate concern. Within California, there's a strong interest in prescribed fire. Of course, we're all very well aware of what California has been contending with, and there's definitely a leaning towards more prescribed fire regimens out here. And those practices absolutely are derived from tribal communities and indigenous land management practices for thousands of years. And so, a subcommittee has formed that's just barely getting off the ground. It's relatively new, but it's really neat to be able to have tribal input into the state level discussion around how NRCS can align with supporting prescribed fire in the state. And yeah, just direct coordination with the state leadership and the like. So not all states have a state tribal advisory committee. Some states have all states have, though, the technical advisory committee. And so like in Alaska, for example, a lot of tribal representatives come to the state technical advisory committee, and so therefore they're able to get a lot of what would be done in a breakout tribal advisory committee. So state by state, it's going to be different. You're going to see I think opportunities regardless, though, to engage at least once, usually multiple times per year in these advisory committees. So one of the projects that IAC has been working on out here is really helping to inform NRCS of conservation planning applicability and functionality within traditional plant management scenarios. So within traditional ecological knowledge management context, there's a real need to explore how the agency approaches conservation planning, and the planning process that they utilize may very well be suited for conventional farming and ranching, yet not be so suited or malleable to traditional management scenarios. So there's really good evidence that actually a lot of the approaches that NRCS takes in conservation planning out here are very responsive to the goals and objectives of the tribes. So there is a good acknowledgement from the tribal partners that we've been working with that that most of the step planning process that NRCS utilizes does work for a lot of the projects that they're working on. So that's a great response, but there's still opportunities, I think, to really push the center there and grow the applicability of that process that's so central to engaging in NRCS programming. And so, yeah, we have 3 sites that are active right now in helping to inform the state level, application of the conservation planning process here in California: Tolowadeni Nation, Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians, and the Santinez Chumash. Each of those sites are really unique. Tolowa is focusing on invasive species removal around a massive prayer rock right along the coast, way up north near the California and Oregon border. And so that's a very different agricultural context than, people might think about when thinking of the term agriculture even. But that absolutely is something that NRCS can assist with. Kashaya Band of Pomo received a substantial portion of their ancestral territory back as part of a multi-agency, multi-partner reacquisition process. And so they have all of these areas that they're in active assessment, engaged in active assessment right now. And so right up along the coast, kind of north central coast of California. And they're looking at all sorts of opportunities to engage their community, re-engage their community on these new lands that were acquired. And there's a huge need for a rangeland assessment, but through the lens of traditional plants and basketry materials. And then the Santee Nez Shumash have been working to develop a native plant nursery, and they're also looking at improving all sorts of habitat areas for native species. And they have a really nice museum and cultural center that's going to be going in that'll focus on Shumash history and contemporary issues. And so there's a vegetation area that they're really focusing on. And so that's, again, kind of another unique context there. Okay, so that was kind of just like the long and the short of my presentation. And yeah, I see that there was a chat that came in, and yeah, we'll absolutely make these slides available and post this on our YouTube channel and the like. But yeah, has T-Con gotten back on?
Yep, I'm rejoined. And I think that last slide of yours led nicely into talking about gathering.
Okay, well, given that I'm on the road right here, can I go ahead and stop sharing and then turn it over to you to share, T-Con?
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize for the technical difficulties earlier.
No problem at all. Okay, thank you all.
All right. My name is Silas T-Con Galbraith. I go by my middle name, T-Con, and I am the Technical Assistant Specialist for the Alaska region. And I'm excited to join both Kier and Stephen today to share about gathering. So what Kier was sharing was, I think, a great lead-in. NRCS is a fantastic partner for the management of the land and having lots of resources. And then, the cultivation of our native plant species in each of our communities is so important. And it's a tradition that I think many of our communities have had for thousands of years. So, many of us know, and practice it, but I think it's important to really consider the why of anything. And for me, wild harvesting really helps me feel connected to the land, helps to ground me, helps feel centered. The practice of going out and wild harvesting is only successful when we choose to slow down. An invitation to be present and to engage with Mother Earth. So just I think about sometimes when I go to the store to get a gallon of milk or something. My wife sent me to get some milk and eggs, and I rush to the store, and I get there and I grab the milk and I come back, and I realize that on that whole journey, I missed so many of the details of the occurrences between the store and home. Really, my mind was projected onto the milk and the eggs, and then on home. I missed everything in between. And the act of wild harvesting and being on the land really prevents us from having that mindset, that projection. It invites us to be completely present, and if we're not, we'll miss the plants that we're looking for. In addition to that, it helps us to retain these traditions and to connect with the cultures that we come from and our identity. Cultivating a relationship with plants. My grandmother always told me that plants present themselves to us and offer medicine when we need it. And that can really mean, eating with the seasons, such as spruce tips or nettles in the spring to flush the body. Or it can mean that when the plant speaks to you, that when you notice it for the first time, when it is shining just right in the sunlight, that it's inviting you to learn about it and integrate it into your plant, into your diet, or use it for medicine. So, and that aligns with something else that was shared with me, that the plant communities will move on, they'll go away if they're unused. And we've seen that happen, in many places where these plants are in a relationship with us as humans, with the traditional practices, and without the engagement of, say, the basket weavers to cultivate the abundance of sweetgrass, it'll disappear from those areas. So it's really important to continue these traditions. And also, it's the evolution of our traditional ecological knowledge, to have the connection with the land, to know the plants, to expand and to generate new ideas that spring from the very depths of that old knowledge, that the stories that have been passed on to us by our elders and those deep connections to the earth. So why wild harvest? Again, it also encourages that physical activity. It's that really holistic health of, the spirit, the mind, and the body, bringing us connected to the land. And depending on our environment and our community, wild harvesting can look very differently, whether it's getting seagull eggs from the cliffs, or a leisurely stroll through the meadows to, harvest grasses. It can, all of it is beneficial to our physical wellness and health. And it offers nutrition to all of us. Frequently agricultural approaches to cultivation, emphasize yield or yield stability or yield per unit resource applied, whereas the plants growing in nature, they coexist with their environment, which includes a constant evolution of their genome. So many studies have shown that the nutrition of wild foods has a much higher amount of phytonutrients and vitamins, and proteins, and fiber, and minerals, all that good stuff, the complex nutrients that are present and frequently in wild plants, and are frequently missing from those that are the cultivars. So it's just an opportunity to really kind of get that into your diet, and a fantastic way to continue the traditions. Also, it creates economic opportunity in our communities. As Keir was mentioning, with those sites where they're bringing back the native species and removing the invasives, we can bring back the native plants that offer a fruit of some sort. So in Alaska, I think there is an opportunity to really look to cultivate our berries. Whether it's the lingonberry or lowbush cranberry, or the many species of blueberry, or mushrooms, or there's just so many opportunities that can create economic structure in each of our villages that allow us to stay in place, and really create a foundation that will allow the continuation of us living, not having to move into the larger cities for opportunities that might be there. And finally, it supports community building. The act of going out and harvesting, or bringing in a whale, all of it requires multiple people. And most of it is built in that relationship, again, where we give and we practice that reciprocity with those who have allowed us to be successful in our hunt or our harvest. And it is just, all of it is a community event, an activity that is really important. When I think about wild harvesting, I consider the question of, what do we want to perpetuate moving into the future? What values will I practice? Will I include in my daily life? And I think wild harvesting just really creates an opportunity and connects me with a lot of the values that I think are important, such as respecting the lessons provided by our elders. The interests of humanity really require careful consideration of our relationship with our environmental context. And the stories that are shared with us from our elders are are those connections and help to broaden our worldview while still setting us in place and connecting us to where we are and where we come from. And I think especially during challenging times, we must take care and protect these things. You know, they are our life source and they give us sustenance that sustain us. The stories, the food, the plants, the animals, if we have that relationship and that connection and we practice ethical harvesting, you know, it really shows, you know, that we value those relationships and that they're meaningful to us. You know, and finally, you know, plants, they're our relatives and they should be treated as such, you know, given all the care and respect and the gifts that they deserve. Something that I've struggled with, but I think is very important, is how do we educate and share knowledge while ensuring that we're paying respect to the plants, protecting them for future generations. And it's really a challenge, and I would be really open to any conversations, and anyone who wants to reach out to me to continue this conversation, I really welcome it. But I've heard from many in the communities here in Alaska that, you know, oh, I would never sell the salmon berries from the village patch, right? Because to create or generate wealth off of something that is a community resource can create conflict, and there isn't a desire or want to do that. You know, so people are hesitant, and that's where I think we really need to look to the whole picture of this presentation. You know, the holistic management practices. You know, where we can practice conservation by utilizing NRCS resources, and then also look to growing techniques. You know, how can we cultivate these plants in a way that they are abundant enough to provide enough for the community for personal use, but also enough to potentially export and to sell on the market. I think it really requires, you know, all of the elements to accomplish that goal. There's a wealth of knowledge and resources, and you know, I think we definitely need to start with the stories that come from our communities, because that traditional knowledge is rooted in tradition and you know, has information that just won't be found in these types of technical and scientific books. But at the same time, they offer, you know, scientifically backed facts that help to sell the product that you might be harvesting, you know, to share the specific nutrients or the protein content. You know, somebody has put the time in to study the plant and do the testing and really have those scientific numbers to back up what we already know as Alaska Native American Indian people. You know, that these are nutritious, that they are healthy, and that they feed us on more than one level, and it's because of our relationship with them. So I really think that wild harvesting, you know, not only offers an opportunity for us to connect and be present with the land, but it also is a really viable economic opportunity for our communities. That brings us to the end of our presentation today. You know, again, you know, myself and Stephen and Kira are just really excited about this tract that's going to be offered at our conference this year. Be sure to check out our website, indianag.org, to get registered and sign up. All of these topics and the things that we touched on a high level, you know, we'll have different presentations that you can attend and get a deeper dive into each of these topics. So we really hope that you will join us this year, and thank you all for attending this webinar today.